It was close to 2:30 a.m. at Bagram Airfield, when the Forward Operations Center fell into a heavy silence. The room glowed red under low light, maps flickering on digital screens, radios hissing with broken static. The last transmission from Bravo 6 had come minutes earlier. A calm voice buried under gunfire, saying they would hold the line. Then only static. The sound of it filled the tent like a slow heartbeat that no one wanted to hear. Colonel Robert Harland stood at the center table, shoulders tense, one hand pressed against a flickering topographic display. The map showed the Korangel Mountains, a stretch of dark ridges locals, called the Devil's Mouth. 12 Navy SEALs were somewhere inside, pinned between two cliffs with no air cover and no exfil route. Every few seconds, the signal light for Bravo 6 blinked once, then went dark again. Someone in the corner muttered about declaring them lost. Harlan didn't answer. He just kept staring at the screen, jaw locked tight, eyes tired from too many nights like this one. Across the room, a young airman whispered that no pilot could make it into that canyon. The walls were too steep, the turns too narrow. Even the drones crashed, trying to fly through it. The words hung in the air until Major Erin Cole looked up from the corner where she had been standing in silence. Her flight suit was half unzipped, collar open, dog tags gleaming under the red light. She studied the map for a long moment before speaking. Her voice was steady, quiet, and it carried. She said she would fly it. No one moved at first. Then Commander Jack Vance, the SEAL officer on site, shook his head. He told her it was suicide, that even he had given up on pulling his men out alive. Erin didn't argue. She simply pointed to the canyon lines on the map, tracing the narrow route that twisted like a scar through the mountains. She said if she flew below the ridgeline and used the cliffs for cover, she could stay under radar and hit the enemy positions from the blind side. Someone laughed under their breath. Not cruelly. Just in disbelief, Harlan turned to her, his voice hard. He said no aircraft was built for that kind of flight, and that she was grounded until further notice. The room waited for her reaction. But Erin didn't flinch. She looked at him once, then back at the map, her face calm, her eyes unshaken. She told him that if he wanted to stop her, he could court-martial her when she got back. For a moment, no one breathed. Outside, the generators hummed and the desert wind scraped against the canvas walls. The red light flickered again, painting shadows across tired faces. Harlan finally exhaled, knowing he'd already lost the argument. He told her she had 1 hour to prep. The room came alive all at once. Orders shouted, tech scrambling to override protocols. Amid the noise, Erin stood still, watching the map glow in front of her like a heartbeat. Somewhere in those mountains, 12 men were waiting. She turned toward the door and said quietly that she was going to bring them home. Then she walked out into the dark. Erin Cole grew up in the flatlands of Kansas, where the horizon seemed endless and the sky felt close enough to touch. Her father, a retired Army Air Corps colonel, had spent half his life flying C-130 Hercules transports for the Air Force. He believed flying wasn't about defying gravity, but understanding it. He used to tell her that altitude only mattered if you respected the ground below. Erin listened, sitting beside him in the open fields where the sound of engines carried farther than voices. When she was 16, she learned to fly crop dusters over the wheat fields. The work was rough, the planes older than her father's boots, but she loved every second of it. The crop duster pilots taught her to trust the feel of the air more than the instruments, to sense wind shifts through pressure on the yoke and vibration under her feet. It was flying stripped to its bones. By the time she entered the Air Force Academy, she already knew that speed didn't make a good pilot. Awareness did. Her instructors at Laughlin Air Force Base noticed that she wasn't the fastest or the most aggressive, but she never made the same mistake twice. She trained on the T-6 Texan II, then the T-38C Talon, learning the language of altitude, energy, and control. While others chased after high-performance jets, she requested the A-10C Thunderbolt II, the aircraft built for low flight and ugly survival, to Erin. It wasn't a tank killer. It was a machine built to protect those on the ground. Before every mission, she walked the perimeter of her aircraft, running her fingers across the titanium skin and bolts, as if feeling for a pulse. Crew chiefs called it superstition, but she thought of it as listening. She would know if the plane was ready long before the checklist confirmed it. Her call sign, Stormchaser, came from a mission 5 years earlier during Operation Gatefire. 2 jets had been hit by anti-aircraft fire in the mountains during a thunderstorm. Radios failed. Visibility dropped to 0. And command ordered everyone to abort. Erin didn't. She used the lightning flashes to mark the ridges and guided both damaged aircraft home, flying blind through the storm. She landed last, quiet, soaked in sweat, her voice steady during debriefing. When asked how she did it, she said the storm showed her the way. Younger pilots called her the manual-era relic, a technician in a digital cockpit. They joked that she still trusted the stick more than the computer. She never corrected them. When they bragged about kill counts or played flight sims between sorties, she sat quietly in the corner, sipping coffee and studying wind reports. The laughter didn't bother her. She had learned a long time ago that real flying wasn't about ego, it was about rhythm, discipline, and the silence between instincts. In the air, that silence was what kept her alive. The Forward Operations Center had turned into a room full of noise and defeat. Screens flickered with digital terrain maps of the Korangel Mountains, lines twisting like veins through shadow. Bravo. 6's beacon blinked in and out of existence near the canyon's narrow throat. The analysts said it was a lost signal. The operators said it meant 12 men trapped between 2 ridgelines armed with RPGs, mortars, and heat seekers. No one said the word doomed, but it hung there anyway. Colonel Robert Harland leaned over the map, his knuckles white against the table. He ordered the room to stand down, said no aircraft could survive that airspace. The walls of the canyon made radar useless. Even drones failed. Erin Cole stood in the back, silent, her flight suit unzipped halfway, her arms crossed. She watched the topographic feed change with every satellite update, the contours forming patterns only she seemed to see. She stepped forward slowly and pointed to the southern corridor, the one that curved just enough to hide her from enemy locks. Her voice was low but firm when she said she could make it through if she flew below radar and masked her signature behind the cliffs. The room fell into argument. Officers fired off reasons and warnings. One shouted about clearance procedures, another about chain of command. Harland raised his voice above them all and told her she was grounded. She stood still, eyes on the map, and said quietly that if they wouldn't authorize the mission, she would take it anyway. Harland's jaw tightened. He asked if she understood what that meant. She answered that she did, and he could court-martial her when she got back. No one spoke after that. The only sound came from the radio's hissing static, like the echo of the canyon itself, waiting for someone brave or foolish enough to enter. Minutes later, Erin stepped into the night air. The flight line was dim under red lights, dust swirling across the tarmac. Her A-10C Thunderbolt II waited beneath the hangar floodlights. Tail number 82 to 811. Its dull gray skin covered with battle scars. Airman Tyler Briggs jogged to meet her, his face pale under the glow. He asked if it was true she was flying solo. She told him it was. He tried to say something else but stopped himself. Instead, he reached into his flight jacket and pulled out a small patch he'd been working on for weeks. A black thundercloud, stitched with silver wings. Stormchaser. He said every legend needed its mark. She took it from him, pressed the edge with her thumb, then fixed it onto her shoulder. Her voice was calm when she said it was time to fly. As she walked toward Ripjaw, the ground crew stepped aside. Some saluted. Some only watched, The engines were silent for now, but they seemed to hum in anticipation, like they already knew what she was about to ask of them. Erin climbed the ladder, one hand on the fuselage, the other steady on the rail. Somewhere behind her, Harlan's voice called through the radio, heavy and tired, saying she had 1 hour. She answered softly that it would be enough. Then the A-10 came alive under her hands. The airfield was quiet, except for the low hum of generators and the steady thrum of engines idling in the dark. The night hung heavy, thick with the smell of jet fuel and dust. Floodlights glowed faintly through the haze, casting pale rings over the gray shape of the A-10C Thunderbolt II. Its twin General Electric TF-34 engines sat wide and high at the tail, dark as the mountains beyond. The fuselage carried the scars of other missions, scratches that shimmered faintly under the sodium lights. Near the nose, the GAU-8 Avenger cannon jutted forward like a clenched jaw, 8 feet of steel designed to chew through armor. Under the wings, AGM-65 Mavericks waited, their fins glinting against the desert air. Tail number 82 to 811 gleamed on the side. Just below the call sign Ripjaw, Major Erin Cole climbed the ladder slowly, boots clanging against the metal rungs. She moved with the kind of focus that made time slow down. Inside the cockpit, the seat creaked as she settled in. The smell of oil and cordite wrapped around her like an old memory. She flipped the first switch to start the auxiliary power unit. A soft whine filled the air as the APU spooled up, feeding power to the instruments. One by one, the cockpit lights blinked awake, glowing soft green and amber. She went through her pre-flight checklist in silence. Engine start, left, right, hydraulic pressure, fuel flow, flight controls check, avionics online. She touched each switch as if it were alive, her hands sure and unhurried. The radio crackled. The tower cleared her for takeoff on runway 17. She acknowledged, her voice calm. Precise. No hint of hesitation. Harlan's voice followed, clipped with tension. He told her she didn't have to prove anything. She answered that she wasn't. She was doing her job. Then she released the brakes and pushed the throttle forward. The twin engines roared to life, vibration rolling through her chest and into the ground. The A-10 rumbled down the runway, its heavy frame gathering speed, the tremor of power shaking the air. The lights blurred past until the wheels lifted off the earth. For a brief moment, the plane seemed to hang in place, suspended between sky and shadow, before climbing into the darkness. In the command tent, Harlan and the others watched the green blip on the radar crawl toward the mountains. Then it vanished as she dipped below the coverage line. No one spoke. Commander Jack Vance stood with his arms crossed, his voice quiet when he finally broke the silence. "She's not flying on chance," he said. "She's flying on memory." The mountains swallowed her whole. At 200 feet and dropping, the A-10C Thunderbolt II cut through the Korangel Valley like a blade through smoke. The moon hung thin and sharp above the ridgelines, throwing faint silver against the rock. Inside the cockpit, warning tones filled the air, a chorus of alerts screaming for her attention. Terrain proximity, altitude, stall margin. Erin Cole silenced them all with one tap, muting the noise until only the hum of the engines and her own breathing remained. She trusted what she felt through the stick, not what the screens told her. The aircraft vibrated under stress, every gust of wind pushing at her wings, but her hands moved with rhythm, smooth, unflinching. The terrain rose fast on both sides. She adjusted pitch and throttle, dipping lower until the altimeter flashed red. Below radar now, invisible to the command center, invisible to everyone except the mountains. The A-10's TF-34 engines grumbled low and steady, their sound swallowed by the canyon. She glanced at her terrain-following display, then ignored it. The valley was a memory she already knew by heart. Years of flying in Afghanistan had taught her how to read the shadows. The ground spoke to her through texture and color. She saw the slope of stone ahead and knew to roll left before the warning tone could predict it. Her voice broke the quiet over the calm. Bravo 6. Smoke on your position. Static answered. She repeated the call. Her tone unchanged. Seconds stretched thin. Then, faint on the thermal display, a white bloom appeared against the black. There they were, 12 men pinned down under the cliffs. Erin leveled out, lining up the canyon's mouth in her heads-up display. She steadied the targeting reticle, thumb resting lightly on the trigger guard. The GA-8 Avenger cannon spun up with a sound like a deep growl rising from the earth. She squeezed the trigger once. Short burst. 30-millimeter rounds tore through the night. A stream of tungsten shells hitting the ridgeline where muzzle flashes had burned seconds before. The roar filled the canyon and bounced back, the echo colliding with itself in waves. The north ridge erupted in dust and fire, stones tumbling like rain. She pulled back on the stick, corrected her roll with a small twist of rudder, then banked hard to the right. Another burst. Short. Clean. Controlled. The gunfire stopped almost as quickly as it began. The A-10's nose kicked slightly from recoil, but she rode the vibration, adjusting her angle of attack, feeling the shift and lift through the seat before it showed on instruments. At Bagram, radar screens went dark. The technicians whispered that they'd lost her. Colonel Harlan leaned closer, jaw tight, eyes fixed on the static-filled feed. He told them she wasn't gone. She was flying below radar, right where no one else dared. Down in the canyon, the SEALs looked up through smoke and chaos. Between the flashes of tracer rounds, they caught a glimpse of a shape slicing across the sky. Low and fast. Wings wide. Engines roaring like thunder. Someone shouted that air support had found them. Erin didn't hear the voices. Her world had shrunk to airspeed, wind pressure. And the next target on her scope, she rolled the aircraft level again, diving lower until the cliff edges blurred past her wingtips. The altimeter blinked under 100 feet. Every second closer meant less space, less margin. But she didn't ease up. The mission was no longer about orders. It was about the men waiting below. The A-10 moved as if alive, as if it too understood the stakes. She steadied her breathing and pushed forward into the darkness. Deeper into the canyon where the radar couldn't follow, where the only way out was through. The missile warning tone hit like a scream through the cockpit, sharp and insistent. Erin's eyes flicked to the threat display. And there it was. A heat-seeking missile had launched from a ridge barely a mile ahead, rising fast and closing faster. Her right engine was already running rough from shrapnel damage. Hydraulics sluggish under strain. She was too low to climb and too close to use flares. There was no altitude. No margin. No. Back up. She whispered to the aircraft like it could hear her. Easy. Ripjaw. We'll meet it head on. The A-10C shuddered as she throttled up the left engine, compensating with right rudder to hold the line. The canyon walls flashed by like blades, streaks of gray and shadow. Her hands moved steady over the controls, trimming pitch and cross-controlling through the turn. The missile was seconds away now, its flare glowing hot in the thermal display. Erin's breathing slowed, her pulse matching the hum of the engines. She rolled level, nose on, and tapped the master arm switch. The GA-8 cannon spun up, a mechanical growl that filled the cockpit. She squeezed the trigger in 2 short bursts, not to hit the missile, but to steady her aim, to ride the vibration through her hands and into her body. The missile streaked in, white and fast. For a fraction of a second, the world narrowed to one sound, the tearing growl of the Avenger gun, and one flash of blinding light as the missile detonated 50 feet ahead. The blast hit her like a wave. The A-10 rolled hard right, alarms howling again. The right engine flamed out, hydraulic pressure dropped. She gripped the stick with both hands, forcing her mind to stay calm. Manual reversion. Trim nose down. Left rudder counter. 1 engine power. The aircraft fought her, pitching, shaking, but she coaxed it back with small, precise movements. It felt less like flying and more like wrestling gravity itself. Back at the command tent, radar screens went blank. The operator shouted that her signal was gone. Colonel Harland leaned over the console, his voice raw as he called her name through static. Nothing. The room held its breath. Then, through the noise, her voice came through, soft but clear. Targets neutralized. Bravo 6 can move. Silence followed. The techs stared at the monitors like they'd just heard a ghost. Harland sank back, hand over his mouth, eyes fixed on the static that still flickered across the screen. In the canyon, Erin steadied Ripjaw. 1 engine sputtering, wings scarred, controls heavy. The smoke trailed behind her like a shadow she had outrun. She glanced at the gauges. Then, back at the night sky ahead, 1 more pass. She told the aircraft quietly, just 1 more, and we go home. The A-10C limped out of the mountains, trailing smoke like a dying comet. Erin felt every vibration through the stick, the airframe groaning in protest. The right engine was gone, the hydraulics leaking, and the control surfaces felt heavy and slow. She spoke to the aircraft softly, coaxing it along, the way her father once spoke to engines that had seen too much. Come on, Ripjaw. We're almost there. The sky ahead brightened faintly, the glow of the base lights shimmering through the desert haze. She kept her left hand on the throttle, trimming every second to keep her altitude steady. Fighting drift with asymmetric thrust. At 10 miles out, the landing system failed. The indicator light stayed red. Erin pulled the emergency lever, and the landing gear dropped unevenly. 2 wheels locked. 1 hung halfway. She didn't have time to fix it. The tower cleared her straight in. She brought the nose down gently, watching the runway lights widen through the canopy. Fire trucks and medics lined the tarmac, red strobes flashing against the night dust. She steadied her breathing, throttled back the good engine, and guided the A-10 down as if balancing on a thread. The first contact hit hard. The left tire burst, sparks flaring against the asphalt. The aircraft veered, but she caught it with a touch of rudder. Hands, firm and patient. The right wing dipped, scraping metal, leaving a shower of light in its wake. Then it slowed, dragging itself to a final halt at the far end of the runway. Silence returned, heavy and absolute. Erin cut the engine, the cockpit filling with the smell of smoke and burnt fuel. She pushed open the canopy and climbed out into the cool air. Colonel Harland reached her first, face drawn, eyes unreadable. He told her she was grounded for a month. Then his tone softened. You saved 12 lives tonight. Before she could answer, the sound of rotor blades filled the sky. 2 A-40 y 7 Chinooks descended, kicking up dust. The rescued SEALs stepped off, uniforms torn, faces streaked with blood and dirt. They stood in a rough line before her. No words. Just 12 quiet salutes under the rising sun. Erin returned it, slow and precise. Behind her, Ripjaw stood battered but unbroken, wings blackened with soot. The light turned gold over the flight line, and for a moment, no one moved. There was nothing left to say, only the kind of silence that follows courage. The base was quiet after the rescue. The adrenaline had faded, leaving the heavy calm that comes after too much noise. Erin spent the next morning in an office, surrounded by stacks of paperwork and tired faces. The air smelled of coffee and jet fuel. Every few minutes, someone passed by her desk, paused, like they wanted to speak, then kept walking. The celebration never came. Instead, The investigation did. Reports, debriefs, interviews. Each one written in the same dry language that stripped the blood and chaos from what had happened. The Pentagon labeled it an unauthorized deviation from mission protocol. Her flight data recorder was flown to D.C. Dissected frame by frame. Erin was pulled from the flight line, ordered to remain at quarters until further notice. A week later, she sat before a panel of senior officers, none of whom had ever flown combat. One colonel read from a binder, accusing her of breaking low-altitude regulations, safety protocols, and command authority. She listened without emotion, hands folded on the table. When he asked what made her believe she was right, she looked at him evenly and said, "Those manuals don't cover dying men." The room went silent. No one wrote anything down after that. Days later, Colonel Harlan stood behind a podium in front of a wall of microphones. He wore his dress blues, his voice measured and calm. He confirmed that Major Erin Cole had violated orders, but had done so to save lives. He ended the briefing with a single line that rippled across every military channel by nightfall. "You can court-martial courage, but you cannot erase it." The words spread faster than the report itself, shared in barracks, hangars, and break rooms across every branch. When the flight data was finally released, it showed the impossible. The A-10C Thunderbolt II had flown between 65 and 73 feet above the canyon floor for 14 minutes straight. Pilots called it suicide altitude. Erin had made it doctrine. A month later, a quiet memo circulated inside Air Force Command. It added a new clause to the operations manual. 1. Allowing pilots to rely on instinctive terrain navigation when all systems failed. No one mentioned her name, but everyone knew who it was written for. The rule was unofficially called the Stormchaser clause. Erin never asked about it. She didn't need to. Some legacy don't need medals. They just need to be written into the rules. Years had passed since the night over Korangel. The story of the pilot who flew below radar to save a trapped team of soldiers had turned into something larger than memory. Half-legend. AF-lesson. At Nellis Air Force Base. The name Stormchaser was painted on the wall of the flight school, beneath a mural of an A-10C cutting through clouds. Below it were 4 words, every pilot repeated during training. Low enough to matter. The new generation whispered about her in the halls, trading stories of impossible flight paths and decisions no manual could justify. Most had never met her. Those who did were always surprised by how quiet she was. Major Erin Cole preferred the classroom to the spotlight. She taught flight theory, terrain awareness, and manual recovery drills for both the A-10C and the T-6 Texan II. Her students watched her closely, waiting for signs of the hero the rumors described. But she moved with calm precision, her voice even and patient, guiding them through simulator runs. She spoke more about mistakes than victories, about how a pilot's best tool wasn't aggression, but control. During one session, a young lieutenant asked her what it felt like to fly through the canyon that night. Erin paused, resting a hand on the console. It felt like being alive with no guarantee of staying that way. She said simply, then turned back to the screen. Outside the hangar, the desert sun hung low, painting everything in gold. The rumble of jets rolled across the sky as a new formation climbed above the airfield. Erin stepped out to watch them, her reflection flickering in the hangar glass. The wind carried the faint echo of the GAU, 8 cannon from the range miles away, a sound only pilots truly heard for what it was. She smiled to herself, knowing the legend wasn't hers anymore. It belonged to the sky, and to every young pilot learning to fly just low enough to matter.